All right. Frankie Montas. He's a guy that many people have split opinions on. I got text messages as soon as it was announced by family members asking me, "What are we doing? We're signing a guy for 1 year, $16 million. Guy didn't even pitch but 2 innings last year, and when he did pitch, he was average at best. Now this is obviously some of the other naysayers are saying, well, when he pitched well, it was only because he threw for Oakland. They had a big ballpark. Despite his splits, I'm sure that you would have those in front of you and say, well, that's not quite the case. But there is obviously a little bit of a crowd here, Nick. Let's not act like everybody is doing dancing in the streets for this signing. There's a little bit of the crowd that's asking themselves, $16 million. That's a lot of money. Do you think that's where we're at in the state of baseball, where, again, if you go to the grocery store, Nick, don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but 5 years ago, things that you used to buy in the grocery store didn't cost nearly as much as they used to cost. Is this more of a reflection on inflation in baseball than it is about the Reds believing in this guy as much or significantly where they had to have him and they were willing to pay him whatever or overpay, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think you probably a $16 million contract is probably like a $10 or $8 million contract maybe 5-6 years ago. It's just a totally different state. You have to overpay. And then the Reds on top of that, I think have to overpay a little bit for pitchers just because of their ballpark, especially when you're signing guys that are on short-term deals where they're trying to reestablish their value. So you factor the two of those things together. I mean, this is just what a pitcher like that's going to cost. I mean, look, this guy has a lot of upside. Finished sixth in the Cy Young vote in 2021. That wasn't all that long ago. This is the kind of risk I like the Reds to take. A 1-year risk. If it works out, it'd be incredible. You have a top of the rotation type arm. If not, it's a 1-year contract. It doesn't change anything about the long-term future of the team.
I think the better, not I don't say better question, but the one area of conversation that I don't know has been discussed as much as maybe it should have been is what is the Reds' kind of plan, or what would they like to have happen moving forward? Because one thing that people obviously maybe scream and yell about is they want this team to spend money, right? You got to spend money to win. You got to spend money to win. And for all intents and purposes, that is true. Me and you, I think we see eye to eye on this a little bit. You at some point have to obviously pony up in certain situations to try to fill holes that otherwise you weren't going to be able to take care of on your own through your own guys. The only thing that I have at this point to ask you is, when you spend 1 year, $16 million, yes, it's only money, right? But you could also make the case, and I'm playing devil's advocate to a certain extent here, you could make the case that you could use that $16 million on extending Noelvi Marte, or extending Matt McClain, or extending Ellie De La Cruz, or extending X player. That is still money that the Reds are shelling out that they otherwise could have used somewhere else. And that is I don't want to say that's the logical argument, but that would be, to me, if you were to want to be the pessimistic viewer, or maybe even the devil's advocate, that is the one case scenario where I could actually somewhat sit there and listen to a reasonable debate about. My question is, in a roundabout way, do you think the Reds even have a plan yet as to what they want to do? Do they want to start extending guys that are this young core, or do you think they just want to wait it out a little bit and say, you know what, we don't know what we have. We got him for 5 more years. Let's just ride it out.
I wouldn't put it past the Reds to still extend a player or two this offseason. Most of these deals that you see with contract extensions, the first couple years are not much. It's down the road, which is why I think that the Reds really pushed hard for short-term contracts. Number one, it's not long-term risk. Number two, it gives them more flexibility to be able to extend guys. And a lot of these guys are just going to cost more on their normal years of control as they get deeper into arbitration. The problem really with the Reds contract extensions is I think the guys that would probably be the most willing to sign a contract extension, I don't know if necessarily it's in the Reds' best interest. Like, I don't really think Matt McClain at this point, it makes a lot of sense to go sign a big contract extension too, just because he is older. He was so good last year. It's like, are you signing him at you signing him at too high you have to be careful with some of these guys because I think, after the first year of Jonathan Indy and Tyler Stevenson, we all wanted to extend those guys, right? And that obviously was a good decision that they didn't at this point, even though I still think both those guys could be valuable next year. Those contract extensions obviously would not have aged very well.
Now, you might want to believe Nick Kroll. I'm a man that doesn't really believe wholeheartedly everything he says. I think that there's times where he obviously leads things on to a public perception that he's trying to do or not trying to do. He's done that with Jonathan India at times. He was not on the market back at the trade deadline. They're not interested in moving, and then all of a sudden you see reports that they are interested in moving him, and then they were already very transparent and upfront with him about the offseason about how he's probably going to move, and you can just kind of sense that through some of the interviews that even India did towards the end of the year, and certainly what he said at Reds Fest. He said this organization is very, very honest and transparent of where they're coming from. So that tells me that they've obviously had discussions with him, that they are actively shopping him. My question is that Nick Kroll said that just a couple days ago on the announcement of Montas that essentially they are probably done with big free agent signings for the rest of the years, and there's not really any more big moves to be made. They might add, I think in his words, a depth guy or a bench guy or something along those times, or some of those terms, and relief pitching. Do you believe him?
Yeah, I think they're probably done with any sort of big deal unless something falls in their lap with the trade. I don't see them signing more free agents. When I saw that Buck Farmer contract, that kind of made me think, all right, they're done with the bullpen. Buck Farmer is like your last signing. I don't think you sign Buck Farmer if you're still waiting out other potential free agents. I can't imagine the Reds are going to sign another starting pitcher at this point. I mean, you're up to 8 legitimate starting pitching options, which I'm great. I love that. I'm all about stockpiling, but I don't see them going any more than 8 starters. And that's not even including guys like Christian Roa that are going to be starting there at AAA. They do have some upside. Maybe there's a platoon outfielder that kind of, falls in the Reds' lap, like a Michael A. Taylor or someone that they like. But it depends on if you find that big or not. That's about probably the biggest thing I can see the Reds doing, unless somehow some sort of big trade kind of comes together that they're not expecting.
Yeah, of course, you never know what the future holds from time to time. You can also make the case and the argument that as the offseason progresses, you get later and later and later into this offseason, both sides, of a deal when they're trying to negotiate, it becomes much, much finer, and it starts to materialize where maybe one side cracks before the other. They start to show their true colors, and they're like, you know what? And I know that Cease has been talked about significantly in all these different pieces, but my point is that if there is a move to be made, it very much could happen late, and it might be a situation where something that was talked about before, where it was quote unquote off limits, is now all of a sudden on the table because somebody called someone else's bluff. And the same thing could be said about some free agents as well. If there was one thing, though, to push back on you thinking they were done, and if you had a wish list, and I know Christmas is over, but it's a new year, why not just maybe have one more run in the sun with Mr. Santa Claus? If there was one more thing that you wish that the Reds would do, what would it be if they did make one more, we'll call it somewhat significant move?
Well, I think you'd have to make another move because I think you've kind of got to a point where you probably have too many position players at this point, which, again, I'm normally the you can never have too many. I'd love to see the Reds if Jorge Soler, they could get him on a contract that wasn't too unreasonable. I just think you put his bat right in the middle of the lineup, hitting a great American ballpark. He absolutely destroys left-handed pitching. But a roster with India, Steer, and Soler, 3 guys that, and I guess probably throw CES into there too. That's basically 4 guys that are like first base DH types. Maybe can kind of play a corner outfield. That's probably a little bit too much, but he would be the one guy that I think could really take the Reds to the next level if they could get him.
Hey there, thanks for watching our video. If you like our stuff, like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see more of our content, check out this video and check out this video.